evening, everybody, or morning if you're in Europe or something like that. Thanks very much for having me tonight. I'm going to share my screen and just jump right into a quick introduction to myself and the topic for this evening. So hopefully this will work. Let me know if you can see Gemini Advanced or now a slide.
We can see it, Michael.
All right, great. So that was an amazing intro. For those of you who haven't heard it before, Paul and John obviously are involved in many, many things, conferences, advisory work, HPS articles. And I met them a while back and got involved a little bit with Blueprint from Massachusetts. My background, I've been working in AI for about 10 years. I've been the CEO of a couple of AI startups. And I run a little advisory company called PracticalAI. Just do one thing, unlike Paul, and that's educate senior leaders on AI fundamentals and help them develop their AI strategy. So tonight, we're going to jump into a fun topic, customizing AI assistants. Here's the agenda, which I assume everybody is now taking a look at. There's really three major types of assistants that we're going to get into. This is a quick slide I put together to just put things in context before we actually put our hands on the keyboard and start building something. Along the x-axis, you have increasing effort, cost, and complexity, but the more you put in, the more you get out. There's more and more power you can get out of LLMs, right? So we all, I assume, know about the difference between a well-formed prompt and a prompt that's not as good. There's long context windows. Each of these could be its own little mini class. Custom assistants we're going to talk about today, and then of course retrieval augmented generation, fine tuning, and some people have even gone so far, like Bloomberg, as to build an LLM from scratch. So that's just to put things in context. I think the way to think about custom assistants is in your head. If you're doing something ever repeatedly with LLMs, you should start thinking about custom assistants. So I'm going to bounce over now. Hopefully this works to ChatGPT. Can everybody see that okay, Paul?
Yes, Michael, we can see it.
All right, great. So we're all used to this interface. What you want to do to build a custom assistant is click over here on the left where it says Explore GPTs. And you may have done this and seen some of the pre-built custom GPTs that are out there. But what we want to do is first either create, or I'll go into my GPTs. From here, you can create a GPT, and I have a few that I've already built. So again, this is AI Custom Assistants 101. So I'm assuming people have not done any of this before. So we'll start out with creating. You can create just by speaking English. And it makes it very simple to just go back and forth and try to create a custom GPT that's, again, going to do something that you're going to do repeatedly. But it's usually better to use this configure tab. And so you give it a name, whatever it might be. You give it a short description. You give it some instructions. We're going to go through all this. I'm going to save time, go back to some that I've already created. Here is a financial report analyst, and it looks just like a normal chat, but instead of chatting with a general LLM, you're chatting with something that's been trained to do one thing repeatedly and well. And so let's look at what's inside here by going to edit it. And now, again, to save time, you can see how I set this up. Gave it a name, a description. You can give it a photo, or you can use DALL-E, which I'll do just to show everybody what it does to come up with some sort of icon. And here is where you give it what would be a very well-formed prompt. And so I've set this thing up, pretending to be someone who has to analyze financial reports on a regular basis, so that every time I do this, I can save some time. And I'm going to keep things simple here. I turned off web browsing because I want it to just stick to the document that I upload. And there's some other things we'll talk about, but for the first effort here, I'm just going to show you, basically you give it a persona and you give it some tasks, and then you go to town. So this is how you set it up and build it. But again, if I was going to my GPTs, I would just launch it. So first thing you do is upload the document that you want to have it analyze. And I have some here that I set up before, some annual reports from Apple. I've been doing this for the last couple hours, testing everything, so hopefully this works out well. And so really, once you upload the document, again, the idea is you're doing this on a regular basis. You can just tell it to go. And it's going to read this document, and then it's going to follow the instructions. It should follow the instructions to summarize the findings, which is what I asked it to do, is to build an executive summary. And then I asked it to build a table. So again, live demo, hopefully the table works out. So think about all the things that you do repeatedly, and think about, instead of having to go every time to an LLM and put in a prompt and give it, the persona, give it the task, give it an example of the format that you want, that you can have it saved for that repetitive task, give it a name, and then every time you want to do it, you save a tremendous amount of time and effort. And I'm very happy to see that it actually did what I expected it to here. So that's the most basic concept of creating a custom GPT. And so now I'm going to actually get into some more of the details. I'm going to go now to, again, exploring GPTs. We'll go to my GPTs. This one's a little more complicated. So this one is called a prompt tutorial. And the idea here is that if you wanted to help somebody at your company learn how to write great prompts, you might have a guide that you want it to sort of quiz people on. And so again, hopefully my demo will work well. I'll just write go here and see what happens. I've given it a prompt guide to read, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. This is the name of it. And so it's read through this guide, which is very long, and now it's teaching me through quizzes about it. So how did I get this to happen, right? So if you go into the details here, wait for it just a second. There we go. The thing I did different, everything's the same. I gave it a name, I gave it a description, I gave it the directions about what I wanted it to do, but then I gave it some knowledge. And so here you just upload files. And this is where I put this, and you only have to do this once. And the cool thing about these is that when you save them, you can share them with other people. I meant to say in the very beginning, you do have to pay for the paid version of any of these tools in order to be able to create these custom GPTs. But one of the nice things about this one from OpenAI, custom GPTs from OpenAI, is that you can share it with anyone you want. So imagine doing this for your whole company, for anything that you want to teach them, right? Anything that you want people in your company to know, instead of just sending them a link to the document and telling them to read it, you can have some fun and make it more interactive. And again, with this custom GPT, you can make a copy of it and upload any document, and it's going to create this back and forth sort of custom tutorial. So that's a little bit more advanced, that you can put the knowledge in there. You can turn on these capabilities, web browsing, image generation. Those are optional, but sometimes you want it, in addition to what the knowledge is here, be able to go and look around outside. And then the last thing I'm going to show just very briefly is called actions. And this is potentially extremely powerful. Here is where you can have your custom GPT, again, something you're going to do over and over again, basically reach out via some programming, via a schema, and connect to an API of almost anything else. So if we're not going to get into it here due to time, but if you're familiar with APIs at all, there's several different ways that you can authenticate with APIs, and you pick the one you want to do here. And then you put the schema in here that you want to use to connect to whatever the other program is, they actually have a couple quick examples. Again, this is a little bit of programming, but you can actually use ChatGPT to do this. As many of us know, there's a lot of coding assistants out there, so it doesn't need to be incredibly complicated. Just want to show this briefly because this is the only one that has this sort of built-in of all the different custom ones that we're going to look at tonight. So now I've shown just a little bit of lag here. Just one sec. A couple different ways to build these. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the other two examples for tonight. And then if we have time, we'll circle back and get into a little bit more detail. So Gemini, again, you have to pay for the advanced version of Gemini in order to use what are called gems. So Gemini Gems are very similar to or analogous to ChatGPT, CustomGPTs. And the gem manager is down here.
Excuse me, Michael.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to ask for any questions on OpenAI before you leave that vendor?
Sure, I can do that. Although I think actually, if you don't mind, it would be, these are going to be a lot shorter. I'm not going to go into much detail on these.
Okay, great.
And then it'll be easier to, once everything's in context, to take the questions. So don't worry, I'm not going to do the same level of detail as I did with the first one on these next two. Is that all right?
Great, they're great.
Cool. So there's a couple pre-made ones, which is different. And one thing that's interesting is you can just look in here. If you make a copy of it, you can see all the instructions that they gave. But it's the same general concept, right? If you want to create a new gem, you give it a name. So we'll call it Equity Analyst. I just want to show a couple differences. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but here's one cool difference. Because in the end, I think people are going to have to make a decision about which one do they want to use and pay for. And so that's part of what we're trying to do tonight is just give you a preview, an introduction, so you can decide if it's worth it to even pay for any of them. But if so, which one would be best for you? So let's just say you're an equity analyst. You read docs and report on them. Now that is a very lame prompt, but that's on purpose because down here, this is a cool thing about Gemini when it comes to these Gemini Gems is you can actually have it take your lame prompt and create a good prompt. And so I just wanted to show that functionality. I'm not really going to I'm not going to save this one, but you can see it's very similar. So that's one difference. And now I want to show you another one that is potentially even more interesting. Another difference. So when you do, I'm going to take a chance here, a new gem, and I'll call this summarize and respond to my most recent email. And I can actually copy that right in here. And here's the thing I want to show everyone. And you see this menu comes up. Now, how did that happen, right? So over here in settings, you go to extensions, trying to not go too fast for Zoom. And you have to turn on these different extensions so that gems, we're building gems, can integrate with Google Workspace. It actually works with the main prompts as well. And there's some pretty cool ones, as you can see here, but I've turned on the Google Workspace. It's a little flaky and it doesn't work every time, but I created one earlier. And so if we basically, it looks at my most recent Gmail, summarize it, and draft a concise response. So, of course, it'll be interesting to see what my most recent Gmail is. So I'll just say go. And now yeah, see, it didn't work. This is what I mean by flaky, but I did it just a few minutes ago, and here's what happened. So I launched the exact same thing, and it went out and found my Gmail. It read the most recent one. And just a few minutes before this lab, it was a confirmation about the weekly learning lab. And then it generated a quick response. So the power here that this one has over OpenAI is its ability to integrate with Google Docs. You can say, read through my Google Docs, or read through these Google Docs, or read through this area and summarize these documents. Find ones that have these things in it. The integration with Google Workspace is the coolest part. So now that was a little shorter. Now I'm going to go to Claude, and everyone's going to laugh here because you see this little, you are out of messages. So I can't actually do, this is the first time it's ever happened to me in my life, but I can still show you a little bit about projects. So over here on the left, again, CustomGPTs, Gems, and now projects. You click here if you have the paid version. You create a project. You give it a name. I'm just going to say test to save time. This doesn't actually do anything. This is just sort of the description. You create the project here. And then over here, you can add content. And so this you can upload from a device, just like I added knowledge when I was in the CustomGPT world. This is interesting. Here you can just type in or just paste in a bunch of knowledge. You don't have to have a different document. So that is a little bit of a difference. And then you give some custom instructions. And again, here's where you put in, you're an equity analyst and you want to be professional and things of that nature. So you see that this one in many ways is sort of the simplest of the three. It doesn't really have some of the other cool functionality that the first two have. And we'll come back to sort of what that means later. I did try earlier to do this, and it does work pretty well. I didn't find it to be quite as easy to use as the other two. So now that I've summarized sort of all three, Paul, I'll come back to ChatGPT, and I'll go into create GPTs, and I'll take some questions from people.
I've got one, if I could.
I have a couple. I don't know how much more time we have right now, but I do have a couple sort of summary slides of what we just sort of went over that can help people at the end.
And I also have a question of this.
Yeah,
If
so
you're
if you could raise your hand, I'll help the line here. Go ahead. We'll go Bruce first, and then T-Bold and Rosemary. Go ahead, Bruce.
I just wanted to ask you in this one, the ChatGPT, you were showing integrations using like OAuth and API hooks, that sort of thing. Is there anything where you can do like I'm not sure, Zapier? Can you interconnect those kinds of services also to go retrieve some data and then bring it back and do some more with it? Real-time data?
You can. You absolutely
Okay.
can. And Bruce, if you reach out to me afterwards, I'll send you a link to a video that actually covers that exact workflow.
Okay. Okay.
Is it Ty Bowl? I'm hacking your name up. My apologies.
Why don't we go with Rosemary while we're
Rosemary,
waiting?
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Rosemary.
Sure, thanks. This is great, Michael. So I've been creating custom GPTs for a while. I have this, what I've found is in this example that I put in the chat, this is what it looks like. If you enter Aiden or Stripe, you'll get an example, but you can click on the output there. I find that maybe 40% of the time that I test it, it will either stop or not complete completely. Is there anything I can do? It's quite a long one. If you click on the usual output, it goes into a lot of different things, but I haven't found a way that it reliably works all the time. And I found that I also, the maximum to get the full output is no more than 4 competitors at a time for this competitive review one.
So, I mean, we're getting into the details of a specific one, but what is the thing that most of the time it works? What happens when it doesn't work?
So it will either only do a short piece of the GPT. It won't go into the whole thing. So if you just click on that link where it says this is the usual output, you'll see how much there is. And oftentimes it won't get through all of that for the same companies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it here, if everybody can see that. This is the one you're referring to?
Yes, right. So if you just keep scrolling down, there's a lot of information. This saves, when it works really well, it saves marketing and salespeople a lot of time.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it just doesn't do this. And of course, you know, people don't know that. They just think, oh, this doesn't do very much. So I don't know why it stops without completing.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, there could be a variety of things, but I would say the thing that we should all remember is that whenever there's an LLM under the covers, including these custom GPTs, even with RAG, which is more advanced, in the end, right, it's still predicting the next token. And it's tricky for it. I'm not a complete expert, but I do know that there's a very specific way that it decides to stop. Because why does it could just keep going, right? It's really just, what's the next most word that's most common? So how does it even know when to stop? I think that's what it's getting wrong here, right? Some of the time, because your thing is so long, I think if it's shorter, my advice to you is to try to break it up. It's not as elegant, but if you really want reliability, you know, maybe break up the responses or do it in steps instead of having it do it all at once. I think you'll find that it's more reliable when it's not trying to do, again, this autocomplete of a much longer thing and then figure out when to stop.
Yeah, I wonder Rosemary too as well. My understanding is that these models are not compiled, they're interpreted. So a lot of times, you know, debugging interpreted languages can be tricky, especially when they're kind of new. You know what I mean? So, I just, I think there's so many parameters that they're trying to sequentially interpret that I wouldn't be surprised if it gets caught up sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
We could try I can't pronounce his name either. Anyone else who has, I'll let you go for it and look at who's got their hands up because I can't see them all.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands there. Go ahead, Michael. Why don't you finish up the slides and then we'll go open mic.
So what I was going to try to show really quickly, and I apologize, I didn't have it open, but let's see if I can do this really quickly. It'll only take a sec. crewai.com. So this is a cool place to build agents, which is a whole nother subject. But what I wanted to show here was if we go down to their documentation, right? This looks a lot like the typical documentation that everyone would want to go to on a website. And they actually created trying to find it. Basically what they did was create a way to talk to all their docs, and they used a custom GPT from OpenAI. I'm not going to find it here. I'm not going to find it in time, but if you click on the thing here, this is a commercial website. What I found fascinating was when you click on talk to our docs, it actually takes you over right to something that looks a lot like this. It actually bounces you over to a custom GPT that they built using the same technology that we saw tonight. So this company has said this is the best way to do this, to let people talk to their docs for essentially, very little money. And I brought this one up because I thought it would be a good close. But just imagine it saying, Crew AI, talk to our docs, and it can ask a question of any of those documents that were listed in the documents there. So that's another very powerful sort of use case. And then the last thing I'll show is, I summarized this about different things they can do, and then which one should you use, in my opinion. Claude doesn't do quite as much as some of the other ones do. It doesn't have the actions. It does actually have knowledge, so that's a typo on my part. The live updates with Google Workspace is very powerful. If you're a Workspace power user and you're in Google Docs all the time, you might want to go with Gemini. The APA access, gives you unlimited flexibility, and so if you really love ChatGPT, it depends really, I think, what LLM you like the most. I'll finish up there and say thanks to everybody for listening.
Fantastic, Michael. Thank you. Excellent presentation. Last call for questions from Michael, and then we'll go to open mic.
It's Thibault here.
Yeah, sorry. I've had problems in the past of getting involved with Google. I call them projects rather than products, right? They're notorious for, starting something and kill it or renaming it and making another one and that sort. Do you have any concern about that with any of this Google Gemini stuff, right? Because it started out as even Bard, so.
Well, I mean, I would never predict with confidence exactly what a company's going to do, but given all the macro trends in AI, it would be extremely unusual for them to sort of shut down Gemini. That would be like shutting down their OpenAI competitor. It doesn't make any sense at all. And furthermore, I don't think they're going to shut down Gems. Of course, they might rename things, but I think, to be really candid, I mean, I know some people that work at Google, and one of the reasons that it takes them longer to do some things than OpenAI is because it's a much bigger deal for them to try to back out of something. It's much more embarrassing. Microsoft just did it, and a lot of people have lost confidence in some of the things in Copilot. Now they have Copilot version 2 or something like that because they screwed up version 1 so bad. So I think something like that could happen here, but I wouldn't worry about it going away. It's not going to be like Google, what do they have, Loop or not Loop, but there was something like that where they just
Google Glass.
Yeah, right. I don't think this is like that. There's too much at stake here.
Great. Thibault, how am I saying your name?
Thibault, yeah, Team
Thibault,
Thibault,
thank you,
football player, spelled differently. And sorry about earlier, my Zoom crashed on me right when you called my name, so sorry about that. Yeah, my question is, I've been playing a lot also with OpenAI and making assistant. So it's great to do like a POC type of work, but then what do you do? What do you recommend to take it to the next step, right? So now I want to make it a product. I want to because now I'm the only one that can modify that GPT, right? So I want my whole team to be involved, or I want to make it productize it, right? What do you recommend?
Paul, do we have another couple minutes? Do we have like 2-3 minutes?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
All right, let me just, it'll only take, I think, a minute. So explore GPTs, create, I'm just going to go test, give, always answer with 49. That's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing. So I'm just going to tell it always answer with that number. I'm going to hit create. This is what I wanted to show everyone. So the default is anyone with the link. So I can, just like I already forgot your name, the kind woman earlier who shared things. You can share the link with anyone. But if you want to make money, I would go online and get a tutorial. But you can share it with the GPT store. And then anyone who you can go into that GPT store, I don't know, I've never really done this, so we'll give it a try here. I think this answers your question, right? And then I'll view the GPT. It's not very exciting, but if I explore GPTs, it should be in here somewhere. Again, I've never done this before. We'll see if it shows up, but there is a way for you to just build something, test it, no results found. So that was too quick. And then be able to publish, a lot of these are built by amateurs, so to speak, as opposed to a company. And so there's definitely a way to do that here, just a bit like the Apple Store. Does that answer your question?
Partially, I was just thinking about, now you're the owner of that GPT, and now you want to give your colleagues or your friends, say, hey, I'm going to go on vacation. Why don't you be responsible for it and modify the prompt for me? Instead of 49, put 59. There's no really way to share that ownership of that GPT. I can make a copy of it, no problem, as long as you allow me to do it. But that's kind of the limitation I found of those GPTs. I see it as great for POC, but I'm struggling to see the value as a product in itself, right?
So that is an excellent last question, because that's a great use case where you want to be able to basically have people collaborate on the instructions for a custom assistant within a team, within a company. I have not done that. I do know that Claude and OpenAI have a version called Team version. If someone else has used it, maybe they'll know the answer. I've only done the pro paid version, but not the Teams version because I'm a one-man company right now. So that's the only thing I can think of is look up whether or not the Teams version, if you pay more, it's $30 a month for the Teams version on these as opposed to 20, whether or not it allows you to do what you just said. That's a great last question.
Let's keep rolling here. So we'll go Raymond, Gabrielle, and then Christine. I want you to tell us about our event here, but go ahead, Raymond.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say real quick was I was looking for how to change which model is being used in the custom GPT. That may have some impact on the results. I don't know if you can select O1 mini or you're stuck with 4 or whatever. And then the other thing, what else was it? I was thinking not much time. Oh yeah. A lot of the stuff that I've been doing, like with Crew AI and Composio, and N8N is another place to check where they have these different frameworks, and you can use a combination of models. But I got pulled into agents from this custom GPT. Like I started with custom GPT, and I wanted the ability to see underneath the covers. And that's kind of why with the custom GPT, it's hard to see underneath the covers. It's hard to see the traffic and the API calls. So I've really been leaning towards using the APIs that gives you more flexibility and more control. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah, you'll definitely get that. I would just to answer your question, I don't know how to do it in OpenAI. I'm not sure, but here in Claude, you can pick when you're creating a project or a custom assistant, you can pick which model you're using. So at least one of them allows you to do that.
Great. Let's go to Gabrielle and then Christina. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
Yeah, as you mentioned about Microsoft Copilot being a failure, right? And I thought myself I use Designer, Microsoft Designer to make some artwork, and it looked great. And but the concern I was left after with that result is that I was wondering like where would the author's rights would sit when you generate a prompt or several prompts to keep trying again and fixing that artwork. But then Microsoft could come back and say, but we generate that artwork. I mean, if I had drawn it using, like, say, this big pen here, Big cannot say that they generated it, even though, like, without any pen, it'd be just a blank paper. But if it's generated using AI, the makers of AI, they can say like, but we're the ones actually doing the art. You just made a prompt. You just did a recast. So what would be the limit of between you did the work or somebody else did the work and can be the author of that work and can later, 2 years down the road, if you make a lot of money out of that artwork, then you can risk being sued over that.
Well, that question is a little different than custom assistants, and we can talk about it as a group if Paul wants to. It's the whole idea, or excuse me, the whole topic of who owns something generated by an LLM, and how similar is it to anything that's in the training data, is a hotly contested subject, and there's a lot of lawsuits going on related to this. I think the short answer is it's to be determined about some of these things when it comes to ownership of something created by an LLM.
I guess I just live with the fear that I've done something wrong, maybe, or I could risk a huge liability in the future. Like the guy who got the picture of the monkey, like he put the camera and the monkey took the picture. And later on, apparently, the preserve that had that monkey, they said, no, that was the monkey's authorship, because the monkey was the one who took the picture, not because you left the camera for the monkey. And the guy, he lost his house in the lawsuit. He spent like 6 figures in attorney fees and compensation for that part.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I've seen that can be helpful in the short term, first of all, if you're not making money with it, you're probably not going to get sued. But if you decide to make money with something that you create using generative AI, whether it's an image, let's say, you can use standard tools to take the image you generated and basically do a Google Lens search and say, find this image on the internet, right? So we've been doing that for years now, where you take a picture and say, find this image, and it'll go try to find where it came from. So if you create something and you think you want to know if it's unique, turn things around, do a search for it. And if it turns out that the thing it created is pixel by pixel, very, very close to something else that, you know, is owned by Disney or something, some Disney character, you usually find it that way. And then you'll know that your Gen AI tool was too close to the training data. It's the only sort of free and relatively easy thing I know to do to try to test whether or not this thing is unique, or if, again, it's too close to something that was in the training data.